Remote Evil. Book 1. Chapter 32, the final chapter. A New Life. This audiovisual book was created by Joseph Russell Tim Pugison. He's the man. The boss of Norman loudly shouted it at the company's victory celebration in the office while pointing his fingers at Norman and shaking his hand. This company victory celebration to honor Norman is just one recent example of how life has changed for Norman ever since the crimes committed on Cherry happened. When Norman and the people he knew, including his office mates, were investigated after Cherry escaped her rapist and pointed to him as a top suspect, life for Norman became miserable. He was constantly harassed by the police and his office mates became distant to him. Even his office mates suspected Norman after they heard the explanations of the investigators of how Norman could have faked his alibis. But several months have passed by and the investigations against Norman went nowhere. Throughout it all, Norman appeared shaken by all the attention he was getting from the investigators and from people who are sympathetic to Cherry. But all that changed when Norman publicly countered every explanation of the investigators regarding how he faked his alibis. 4 months after the escape of Cherry, her sympathizers publicly demonized Norman and insulted the police for being useless in trying to put Norman in jail. Her sympathizers also demonized his lawyer and anyone associated with Norman. Her sympathizers even went as far as vandalizing the house and the new car of Norman. But after a while, Norman successfully destroyed the case his investigators are trying to build against him. Social media was his weapon. He blogged and made videos to defend himself on social media. Norman even uploaded the CCTV videos showing how his new car and house have been vandalized. One of his videos even became viral. Norman uploaded a video which showed a big rock being thrown at his window, shattering its glass. He titled his video "Man Being Harassed in His Own Neighborhood." The video also showed him cleaning up with difficulty the mess his shattered window made. There were many sympathetic comments for him in social media after this. The investigations against Norman further collapsed when videos from concerned citizens this time started to show up on social media. These videos recorded how the investigators were trying to harass and intimidate Norman so he would break or make mistakes which would enable the investigators to prosecute him. No matter how much the police argued the point that Norman and his accomplices intentionally allowed the investigators to harass and intimidate him so they can record it and give the investigators a bad reputation, the ensuing social media outcry effectively destroyed the investigations against Norman. Even the lawyer of Norman effectively used the radical anti-police brutality activists to further campaign against the investigators and the police in general. The military investigators were also effectively stopped from pursuing the investigations against Norman. They received order from very high but unknown superiors in the military that their first priority is to monitor Norman and ensure that he is safe. That is all they were ordered to do and nothing else. There will be no more gathering of evidence against him for the time being. All the military investigators could do was to follow orders. They even have an idea why the military changed its policy on Norman. From monitoring Norman, they knew these events happened. The company of Norman was contacted by the military, but their identity was treated as confidential. These military people expressed their interest in the technologies of the company. The company was already a subcontractor for some military weapons projects before, but now these military people wanted all the technologies the company was developing, especially the technologies that Norman worked on. He was even invited to a round of meetings by these military people to explain to them what technologies he knows and was developing. In the end, the company landed a very big contract from the military to develop for them highly classified high-technology urban combat weapons and other related technologies. The military insisted that Norman should be the head of research and development. Norman was promoted and received a big salary increase as well as bonuses and lots of company perks. In just a short time, Norman became a very rich man. He now lived a life of luxury, has influential friends especially from the military, and women now come to him. To the remaining investigators who are still volunteering to actively look for the rapist of Cherry, it is unclear to them what the military will do to Norman, but they are sure about one thing: the military primarily wants to have the technology and knowledge that Norman possesses, and if he is really involved with the crimes he is being accused of, then the military is disregarding it for the moment. The military projects Norman is now involved in is very top secret, but they do know that it must concern national security and that a lot of money is involved. At this time they cannot touch Norman. He has military protection. One thing that consoles the investigators is that because Norman is now under military protection, he will not be able to do anything in secret anymore, like doing crimes, if indeed he is a criminal. The investigators now have to attend to the new crimes that have been assigned to them by their superiors, and their investigation on Norman and the rapist of Cherry has to take a back seat for now. Soon the crime involving Cherry became just another file in the unsolved cases of the investigators. Cherry slowly regained some of her social life back. She has become involved in a radical feminine group and actively volunteers on groups that tries to track missing persons, especially missing women and children. She hopes that by doing so she will be able to find her rapist one day. She feels that she has been let down by the police and does not trust the military anymore, especially after she learned that Norman has been hired by the military and was even being protected by them. John Jr. heard about the new relationship between Norman and the military. He tried repeatedly to gain information on the classified military projects Norman is involved in, hoping that by knowing them he can prove to himself that it was Norman indeed who created the drones and the other technologies used to kidnap Cherry and to kill his father. The military, however, was always able to successfully prevent him from knowing these confidential projects. He now has a deep mistrust of the military but continues to work for them, especially now that he has recently started a family. His search for the killer of his father has to take a back seat now to everyday daily living concerns. However, he was able to gain secret information that the military now has in its possession a flying drone especially designed for low-level combat, anti-tank warfare, and most important of all, it can withstand intense attacks from lethal weapons like a small flying tank. He has no proof that it exists. He only knows about it from his friends at the military, who likes to gossip and complain about how the military budget is being spent on weapons and not on the living conditions of soldiers. John Jr. just hopes this is not related to the drone that attacked him and Cherry, and the same one that nearly killed them both. As to Norman, he is, as said before, very successful in both his financial and social standing, but for some reason his personal and military activities have become classified as if he is hiding himself or someone is hiding him from the general public. Lastly, the killer of Dan and John Sr. as well as the kidnapper and rapist of Cherry still remains unknown and at large even today. The end.
Thank you for your time. I hope you will also read my other audiovisual books. See you again later.